Hey, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am the EntreMusician, and so are you. And so is this fabulous brother we're going to have a great conversation with. Listen, I couldn't think of a better way to end the year than to end it with someone who's been really deep in the pocket of the music industry from all perspectives. Here's a man who is generous, who has incredible experience, and we've just met within this past year. And I can tell you, as we walk into 2025, he's going to be a gentleman that I refer to and I ask advice from time and time again. I would love to introduce him to you. His name is Eric Larsen, sitting, chilling with a cup of coffee in West Sacramento. Man, what's happening?
How are you, Jerry? That introduction was a little too kind, but I'm going to play it back every day. How are you, man?
I'm doing absolutely excellent, man. I really do appreciate the opportunity to have met you. Of course, the Hazelrigg brothers, George and Joff, they, hooked me up. Hey, man, here's somebody that you should meet. And they made the intro, and I'm so grateful to meet you.
100%. I mean, obviously, those guys are great. And anybody that they say, yeah, this is somebody you need to know, there's no vetting. There's no background checks. It's like, yeah, I believe it. It's been great to get to know you this year.
Absolutely. I usually plan better for my podcast, meaning that, I'll go online and I'll search it out and, say, well, I can say this, or perhaps I can ask this. And I want you to know, and I want those of you who are watching or listening to know, I've done no such thing, because I think we can start from anywhere with Eric and it will be cool, man.
I'll tell you flat out, I love the sound of my own voice. So if you have anything to say, you just raise your hand and I'll stop and let you in.
All good. Well, let's start from the present right now, because there is a vast array of wonderful looking guitars behind you. What's the story on the guitars? I think you might play one or two of them, right?
To be honest, I probably tune them and polish them more than I play them in the last few weeks. But I've always just, been a big fan ever since, and we'll cover it again, but ever since the first time I picked up the Monkees' greatest hits, Livermore, California, when I was like 12 or 15, 13 years old, just loved rock and roll. It's like that whole thing. And then started working in a guitar shop just after I got out of high school. And this was kind of really at the height of all the hair metal and spandex and big hair bands. And people were coming into the stores I was working in, and they wanted all, the cool pointy rocker guitars, the wonderful Charvels and Gibsons and all the great BC Riches. I mean, phenomenal brands, but I grew up watching guys with Les Pauls and Rickenbackers. It was a different kind of thing. So way back when, these guitars weren't necessarily the hot thing, and you could pick them up on the salary that somebody making in a guitar store made. And then, funny enough, if you just get old, your used guitars become vintage guitars. So I just kind of watched that happen, but I love them to pieces. I mean, they're art as much as instruments.
My goodness. Well, we can't forsake the keyboard that's sitting there. Is that just a MIDI controller, or are you still?
Most MIDI controllers, and one of the nice Williams electric pianos down below are the new digital pianos. I use that to control some of my modular synth stuff. So when we moved to this new house, there was one room where he said, okay, I can turn this into the office/studio. So it's, we can kind of run it. And in this building, it's the bottom floor of the house where there's just me in the garage. So, I get to have all my pictures of all my buddies that are all autographed outside, some amps in the small hallway, and like the whole floor is just kind of mine to run with. It's fantastic.
That's absolutely on point. So right after high school and working in that guitar shop, you said hair bands and whatnot. We're talking about the 80s. So you are at the birthplace of MIDI, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Right there, it was all happening. The guitar shop I was working at, no longer there, but Runzo's Music World in Dublin, California. All these years later now, and I'll definitely come back to the MIDI, I've gotten to know some of the folks, Ted Aguilar and some other folks in a band called Death Angel, one of the OG thrash metal bands here in the Bay Area. Wow. Nicest guys in the world. I've been doing a little bit of work with them over the past few years. Found out through them that we were all traveling the same circles. So now, all these huge metal bands that you hear that, have stood the test of time, all came out of that same little valley. So at that point, we were playing rock and roll in clubs in San Francisco and Oakland and Santa Clara, and thought we were going to make it, and just ended up that either we just weren't the right thing, weren't good enough, didn't try hard enough. You never know. started to really understand and get more involved with kind of the production and the recording. And at the same time, in the guitar shop, we were one of the first wave of stores that was able to sell the Alesis ADAT.
Mm.
And I'm sure a lot of people watching would have no idea what that was. But, this is before there was a little bit of MIDI sequencing on computers.
Yeah.
Very, very early software that would only do MIDI. And, we watched that happen. And it was just fantastic because you can get all your Yamaha and Roland synths and get them all talking to each other, which is something that really hadn't happened.
Right.
And that, with the ADATs and a synchronizer piece they had, like somebody in a home studio, you actually could, and it was still expensive. ADATs were still a good chunk of change for a hobbyist,
Sure.
but that was kind of the birth of the serious home studio boom that changed.
Yeah, boy, I do remember the ADAT Tascam specifically, and the first home studio I worked in, working on our first project, the guy had chained the two ADATs together.
Yep, they had the Alesis ADAT, and then Tascam took the idea with their DA88. I think it was a more robust machine. I'm not going to throw rocks at ADAT. I mean, it's easy. Right. It's easy to be the second one and improve. What they do with it. But yeah, you could chain a ton of those together, and it was just interesting. I mean, we had one. We were working with another local band that had one, and we loaned them ours, and they'd loan us theirs, and we'd chain them up. So it was really kind of interesting just to see how that brought the community together. And of course, there were all the things where you'd be at a 7-Eleven trying to buy a new VHS tape because one of them just got ate up. I mean, there were all those heartaches, but the fact that it could be done, like you could go into a garage or a warehouse and make a record, I mean, that never existed before.
Absolutely. Well, going back to Tascam just for a second, before the ADATs, obviously, I was burning through a lot of Porter 1s and Porter 2s. I mean, I actually saw smoke come from one because I had overloaded.
You have no idea. They're all back now. You go on eBay and Reverb, they're getting huge prices because people now are going for that lo-fi thing.
Sure.
I was using, if I can remember, I think it was the Yamaha MT44D. I think I had that 4-track. And that was the one where, I don't know if you ever used the Yamaha, there was a little foil sticker that you used to put over the window, and that would tell the machine to read the tape with all 4 tracks in one direction.
Oh, no, I didn't know about that.
The cool thing was, for all the nerds out there, if you're working on a song and you peel that off, you could flip the tape and record one track, and then when you put the sticker on and flip the tape again, you were recording one track backwards.
Amazing.
So you could do all that cool hippie Beatles stuff.
Wow. No, that's news to me. No, I was just there was something about not Yamaha, I apologize, Tascam, that I was really drawn to. Maybe because, it's your first and that's what you get used to. So
I spent some years at Tascam. We'll get to that part of the story, but I mean, what a fantastic company. Just a legacy of innovation and just phenomenal engineering.
Yeah, and it was sturdy, I mean, something about picking up another 4-track and picking up a Tascam, and it just had some girth to it.
They did that all really well. But one of the things that was kind of strange is, you talk about the beginning of MIDI. I was working at the guitar shop, and a very good friend of mine, a gentleman named Steve Lamette, was working there. And I had introduced him to the owners of the guitar shop. He got set up as a teacher there. Just did a ton of stuff. I'm still in touch with him quite a bit to this day. He decided he was going to get a different job and move out of town. So he was teaching guitar at the store in the afternoons and evenings, and he was working at Silicon Valley in the daytime. And he says, you know what, you should go from this music store and get this job in Silicon Valley. So he introduced me to the folks at a company called Creative Labs way back when.
Oh, boy.
And I have some flashbacks. But these guys were making the very first add-in sound cards for PC.
Wow.
And I know it sounds crazy when I'm sitting here looking at what my iPhone can do, but you would have your tower PC and it didn't make noise. You had to put in a thing to have it do that. And then there was a dongle that came out that would give you your MIDI plugs. And at that time, software designers were starting to build software for musicians.
Yeah.
Game designers, of course, were starting to kind of get into better audio and digital audio, but it was still the MIDI and the 8-bit soundtracks. But my job, I came in, with hair down in my butt, and just like, knew nothing, had never seen a PC. they were fine to teach me how PCs work because they needed somebody in the building that knew how musicians worked. So my
Gotcha.
job, when I first got to developer relations, was to go out and work with all of the software manufacturers that were building all of the MIDI sequencers and the very initial digital recording pieces of software. So it was a company called Sonic Foundry. Eventually that gentleman went on to do a bunch of work. They sold to Sony, but we were all, the original version of SoundForge was just shocking to see what that could do with digital audio. And Monty Schmidt and his team are just geniuses. And they, of course, went on to do Acid and all that. But it was just great because at that time, I was like right in the middle of this bizarre revolution where you could manipulate audio, tweak things, change things. You could sequence things. So like I could program in a keyboard part that I could never physically play.
Correct.
And of course, I guess I could have learned how to play piano in practice, but that didn't seem as much fun as sitting there. But it was amazing that, all of this creation started right about there.
Wow. Man, I do remember those days. I mean that wholeheartedly. Everything you're saying is just triggering me. You see me jumping like a little kid because, my first Dell computer, oh my God, I'm thinking
Of course.
98, 99, and then getting the Creative Labs. I sent off for that and it came, and I'm just I'm a little cautious because I don't know what I'm doing, but finally I get a sound. Oh my God, and then the Sonic Foundry guys, the SoundForge, Acid, and Vegas, they actually came, this is 2002, they actually came to a music workshop. I mean, they flew in and was giving out samples. They were a young company at that time, and it was just fantastic.
And just great guys. I mean, they had a vision that was just phenomenal. And those tools still stand up. And one of the things when you talk about your sound card at that point was almost absolutely based on the EMU sound chip.
I didn't know
EMU,
that.
of course, was the synthesizer and sampler company that did the emulator and the drumulator and the SP12 and all the phenomenal companies. Just before I had joined Creative Labs had acquired EMU in Scotts Valley, just outside of Santa Cruz. And it was because they wanted to be able to take their sampling technology and bring it to their sound cards. Sound cards at that time, as you probably remember, had very good but relatively limited FM synthesizer chips. Sure. Great synthesis, but it was always an approximation in FM of what a marimba or a flute should sound like. So Creative Labs was able to put effectively a sampler or a sample playback chip on a sound card. So for the first time, you could actually go and play real instruments just like everybody, with the samplers making. And I remember years ago, we were taking a tour. We drove across the hill into Scotts Valley, and I was getting the tour of the facility from Dave. Wonderful gentleman who's like, this is where the sounds are made, and here's where they assemble the hardware, and this is all this stuff. And we walk down the hallway, and I see this sign, and it's like, employee anniversaries. And it's all these people, 2 years, 4 years, and just, Dave Rossum, 35 years. I'm like, wow, Dave, you've been here for quite a while. He looks at me and goes, well, I kind of started the company. And I felt like a complete moron. He could not have been more gracious. He didn't kick me out, but I just, because I didn't know my history.
Yeah, wow. That's
what
amazing.
I learned that day, and you've probably seen the same, is he's really good at what he does. Supremely confident in his capabilities, so he doesn't run around with a T-shirt that says, "Hi, I invented the emulator." He was the last one to ever tell me, his greatest hits and his resume. And the beauty is, I'm finding that now, the more I work in the music business, the people that are really doing it at the top of the game, they're all chill.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a couple of bad apples, but they disappear pretty quickly.
That's true. I mean, no bling, because you already know who you are and what you do. You're confident in that. And so let's just go forward and learn and grow.
Exactly. And it's wonderful to see, because I'm working with, effectively now a lot of these younger folks making these great records. And these people, men and women, are all supremely confident, but there's no ego.
The best.
So, they're not second guessing. They're not, I mean, how they're dealing with imposter syndrome, I don't know if they really are or not, but I mean, they just get it done. But super open to ideas. And what I'm loving so much now is, and maybe you're seeing this, and I know we're skipping all around, but
That's quite all right.
the engineers and producers these days are sharing things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not the old days where somebody would cover their mixing board with a blanket because they didn't want to, have their EQ settings stolen. People are sharing knowledge, and I think the world realizes that every engineer and every producer is unique because of their taste and their ears, and where you set the cutoff on a filter and a plug-in is, that's not the secret sauce no more.
Absolutely. And it's positively subjective depending on what what you're working on. I want it to sound that way. So,
Exactly.
But no, you're absolutely right. Even, engineers and mixers who I've followed for decades are putting out videos like, that's how that's done, and like you said, it's just really open source from a human level. It's just like, here it is. Here's the information. Take it and do what you can with it and make it
exactly. Better. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of discussions every way about the democratization of music. People on YouTube, are they qualified? Is it good information? Is it bad information? And, people are all over it. And I'm personally of the opinion that 4 tracks and home recording is a good thing. And I know people say that, there are whatever the stats are, 100,000 songs hitting Spotify every day, sure, and there's nobody there to curate, and there's so much garbage out there. But I mean, if it's a rainy day and I'm here in my bedroom studio and I decide to write a song and I enjoy it, then I can share it with the world. Why should I not be able to?
That's absolutely right. I agree with you. And music at its core is expression. This is how I express myself. This is how I feel about this subject or that. And I'm going to get out my little toothpick and my comb and I'm going to string it together.
Yeah, exactly.
We applaud you.
Does it need to be good? I mean, everybody tries to, make it good, and you do your thing, but it's just kind of nice to be able to do it. I mean, obviously I still like to listen to some of the cool college radio stations where they will curate. Here in Sacramento, we thankfully do have a number of actual record stores that are opening up again.
Wow.
So it is kind of cool to go in to meet the guy or the girl behind the counter. I was like, okay, I dig this. What do I need to know? And of course, my daughter's 24, and she's turning us on to all the best music.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice. That's the best thing about now, working back in the music industry is, as you can imagine, it's easy to get stuck in a rut where I'm just going to listen to my Pink Floyd and Beatles and Who records over and over. But it's so hip now because I can get up in the morning, hit Instagram, and see what you're up to or who your guests are. A buddy of mine who's using some gear that we worked on, and he's like, "Oh, this record just hit," and it kind of forces me to listen to stuff that I would never really listen to, and some I really dig, some I don't, but there's always something you can learn from it.
That's absolutely right. The coolest thing about music to me has always been discovery. It's always been discovery. Yeah, this is how you got turned on to jazz. Oh man, this is where, I remember when I first discovered NXS. And man, I was working at Wendy's, and a guy was playing NXS on his cassette player. Man, who is that band right there?
Yeah.
So then it takes you out of the States. Then you go, well, there are other European bands other than quote unquote the Beatles, or and you just grow. Your palate grows, and the appreciation of what everyone brings to the table grows as well.
Yeah. Pardon me. And that's the magic of it.
No, I absolutely dig it. You have to tell me though, because we did skip around a little bit, but, please tell me, from the Guitar Center that you were working, not the Guitar Center, but the guitar store you were working at, to walking into Tascam. How does that, or Creative Labs, how did that actually happen? You left one and just went into the other, or was there,
the first one, the first move into Silicon Valley, I went out and bought a white shirt and a sports jacket because I didn't own either. And I went down, and my good buddy Steve was there to kind of greet me for the interview because they knew he was leaving, so he was having to make introductions. Okay. He typed up my resume because I didn't have a resume. Mm-hmm. So as I walked into the lobby, he comes in and he hands me a resume, and we shake hands. I look down, and my name is misspelled. Mm. So I'm like, hey, Steve, it's all good, but my name's misspelled. It should be Nina. He's like, oh, man. So he runs like mad back into the back. The gentleman that I'm going to interview with, actually, is a gentleman named David Fleck that I was just texting with yesterday. He comes walking out to make introductions to begin the interview. Steve walks around behind me, hands me the paper. I hand it to David. It's still physically hot off the printer. David just starts laughing. I went in and, eventually got that job. But at that point, I was there for 5 years, maybe 6 years, and moved around the company, started doing a lot more work with the PR team, because our PR team at that company, they were phenomenal. They knew everybody in the industry. They knew how to get reviews, how to get news, everything. What they didn't know was how to demonstrate the games, the products, the music software. So they didn't have that expertise. Once again, as we've covered, I love the sound of my voice. So I started going on a lot of the press meetings to kind of be the product expert, started doing more of their trade show productions, started getting into, the bigger and better things, and moved kind of backwards into marketing, which in my mind at that point was simply condensing it to a story about why the world cares you exist, and then you tell that story. So at that point, then, the bubble was hitting in Silicon Valley. So I went from there to another company for the big raise. And of course, this is the corporate America.
Sure.
The days of staying someplace for 40 years and getting a retirement with a pension, I don't personally think those exist anymore. And you stay here for the incremental raises, or sadly, if you go to another company, that's where you make the next big leap.
Correct.
So a couple years here, and then it was the usual Silicon Valley turnaround, which is you go to a small company, maybe a startup, for a couple of years. If you're successful, a giant buys you, and then everybody is laid off while they interview again for their position. Or if you simply don't kick, after 2 years, you run out of runway, the company folds, you get laid off, you move on. So through that, I moved to a lot of different companies, developed kind of the same skill, but with different widgets. So I was at 3D Effects for a while, marketing graphics cards for PCs. And then I moved to a company, Analog Devices, where they were doing synthesis for games. It was physical modeling synthesis for video games. So rather than, we were doing a lot of work with the NHRA, and rather than go out and record the race cars, they had a software simulation that says, okay, if an explosion happens in this many chambers, and these chambers are this big, it would do the physical modeling to create the sound.
Oh boy.
Fascinating stuff. And then from there went on to, was marketing for stud finders for hardware stores, which came into some of the creepiest taglines you can possibly imagine. And we'll talk about them off camera, but it's exactly what you think. And then spent quite a few years at a great company called Pinnacle Systems. And this is where a lot of things developed. So I think you probably ran across them at some time, but in the consumer space, they had some of the very first home movie making software for PCs. In their broadcast space, they were the first ones to do the moving, line on the field for the Super Bowl. They were doing all the Chiron lower thirds for the Olympics. So that was all their real-time graphics. Wow. And so we were doing a lot of stuff for creative, for burning software. So again, it was things where it was tech and consumer marketing, but anything I could do to stay around audio, I always did, because I liked the subject and I liked the people. Yeah. So at that point, Pinnacle Systems had purchased a company called Steinberg that does Nuendo. They do Cubase, and they were doing these beautiful, really great high-end DAWs. It had come to that point where digital audio and MIDI was fully decked out. Sure. And we got to know the person we were helping to market for that group. So they said, oh, well, you should get a copy of this software. So me and my buddy Scott Taylor, we had our little M Audio interfaces with the keyboards, our little tiny lunchbox PCs. We loaded them up with Nuendo, and we migrated from the ADATs to working together on a DAW. And then, the world just opened up, because we could get together his place in San Jose or my place in Livermore. I could FTP him files, and the idea of being able to collaborate just exploded. And that was probably right around 2005, I would guess.
That is correct. Yeah.
So we started doing all that, and then went to a number of different companies. At one point, and this is where it all gets circular, I had always stayed in touch with a gentleman named Michael Hurwitz, fantastic dear friend of mine. I met him back in the music store days, because again, everything comes back to a music store. If you didn't work in a music store when you were 19, your life's over. Just give it up now. Unless you did that, there's no path. I had always kept in touch with him. He coincidentally was our Alesis rep.
Mm.
So he was the guy that, taught me about the ADATs and digital audio. And
Yeah.
we would get together, not as often as we should, but we get together for coffee or lunch. He had stayed in the music industry and was working sales at Tascam. And he says, we should chat. So I go out and meet with Michael. Always great. Fantastic drummer as well. So that you definitely want to look for Michael Hurwitz. Unbelievable work.
Wow.
He said, hey, we're looking for a marketing person to kind of help reinvigorate Tascam. And Michael was pushing very hard along with the gentleman that he worked with to bring in somebody who knew the music industry, but was not from the music industry.
Gotcha.
Because I think their feeling is that people who came up only in that industry all marketed the same way.
Understood.
And they were looking for somebody with more consumer marketing skills that could be applied. For whatever reason, it ended up working well. And I started working with them with both Tascam and TIAC. TIAC is the mother company that does all the really beautiful home recording and home music listening gear, rather. And then Tascam was their recording arm. Fascinating enough, TIAC was the mother company and basically created Tascam to create recording gear to make people make better records that people would then go and buy TIAC stereo with. So it was all one big ecosystem. But through that, started to meet. That's where I met George and Geoff Hazelrigg, because they were using one of the high-end Tascam recorders. So I was able to help kind of reinvigorate that brand, revitalize it, bring it back to its former glory, and then want to do some different things. But then, moved around and started to move more into the boutique manufacturer range. I just found that for me personally, I'm more of a small team startup person than I am a corporate person.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine, I like the security that you get with a corporate job. There's a lot of things to it.
Sure.
But I personally like the fact that in a small group, if you look at your to-do list on a Friday morning, you can see what you did all week.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of small victories. That's just kind of how I like to operate.
Yeah.
So
plus, there's some
really well.
edge to it as well in a boutique company.
There can be. In Silicon Valley, we always refer to the Progress Prevention Committee as that group of people that's like, well, I'm not really sure if we should do that. It's like, okay, then what do you think we should do? Well, I'm not going to give you any ideas. I'm just going to sit here and tell you we shouldn't do things. There's always that group of people, and they stay employed for 20 years. I don't know how it happens.
Amazing.
But that's, and my buddy will watch this and laugh, my buddy Scott Taylor. But there's always those people that they work hard at keeping their jobs, not necessarily doing them.
Wow. Interesting.
And
interesting. It's amazing because you're telling this story, and you're really just walking into, from being just a marketer for these high-end companies to really building something for yourself that you have an actual footprint in. And then, of course, that leads you into the label business, because you form a label, or a label forms out of the work that you're doing.
At one point, I was teaming up with Doug FERN and George and Geoff Hazelrigg. Of course, I was helping to market and sell the Hazelrigg Industries gear, the DW FERN gear. Top-notch hand-built recording gear by geniuses. And They also wanted to kind of build a boutique label, so I got involved with them for some years to do that. And it was just an absolute blast, because we were able to put out albums by artists that were fantastic, but not necessarily mainstream. So it was as eclectic as it got. And if we thought it was cool and could record it well, we made the record.
Yeah.
And it was just an absolute blast. And through that's where I start to get to work with a lot of the top independent engineers and producers, a lot of artists who self-produce, some of the bigger studios. And it's turned into just this dream come true for that 14-year-old kid on a 10-speed, because I grew up reading all the backs of the albums. It's like, okay, well, who was the producer? What the heck's a producer? Who's the engineer? Right. All that stuff. And now, even though I'm not making the records, though I am here at home.
Sure.
I walk in and talk to these people and show them coolest toys in the world. I just started working with a new group, and I'm sitting here with some of these beautiful KSD speakers from KS Digital, German-made speakers. Not a huge brand here in the U.S., but if things go well in the next few years, they will be. But
Yeah.
It's just so nice to know that people are still innovating in the technology. They're building products that, while they can be expensive, are just unbelievable. I'm doing a little bit of work with the folks at a company called Hendy Amps on the Mauer Applebaum Signature Series. And these are 2 rack space units that are doing like multi-band saturation, and you take your final mix. I mean, at some point, offline, I'll hip you these things, Jerry. They are these phenomenal mojo devices where you take your mix and say, okay, I want the guitars just to kind of stand up and wave a little more, and you tweak the knobs, and it just kind of changes the flavor. It's almost like, okay, the mix is good, but I just want to put some Tony C's on it. It's kind of that vibe, but it's just great. And these are all, small groups, very independent, and we're able to put on these great little listening events where we bring in a few different cool products and get some pizza and some ginger ale, and people just kind of come in, and somebody comes in and goes, I'm a producer. It's like, well, fire up one of the songs you did, and everybody's sharing. And it's a great community thing, and it's been an absolute blast, and has really, really meant a lot personally and professionally.
That's amazing. And I would venture to say that all of these things have come about, when you talk about your experience, has been because you just didn't say no. It's not that you had a particular experience for it, or, you went to school or you got paperwork. You just, hey, here's an opportunity, Eric. Let me introduce you to this guy. And you said yes, right? So you're kind of just enlarging your territory as you go on and learning from those new experiences you're creating for yourself.
100%. And I actually been able to chat with some of the younger up and comers here in the Sacramento Bay Area. And, every day more and more people become the younger people, as you can imagine. But in particular, I never said, okay, I need to be a lawyer, so I need to go through these 6 steps. I want to be a doctor. Here's the process. I kind of didn't know. And one of the things that I find fascinating, I talk to my buddies about a lot, is now if I look in the rearview mirror, there are a billion jobs in the music industry. When you watch American Idol, you think, oh, I've got to be the singer, I've got to be the songwriter, I've got to be the producer. There's all kinds of stuff. And it's just, yes, I've been in companies where I've sold, this digital product or this stud finder, and those are all fine. You find something to love about whatever you're marketing.
Sure.
But it's just great to say, this is it. And what's worked for me thus far is saying, okay, I know there's a direction I would like to go, and I would like to end up doing something that's fun, creative, and rewarding. And I always just try to say, okay, try not to take too many steps backward per day. And even if you're only taking a baby step forward each day, you kind of watch and you go, okay, well, that check stand's a little crowded, so I'm going to go over to this aisle. And you kind of like adjust. And through, I would say, probably more fortune than luck, I've tried to make sure I was never shy. I've tried to make sure that I, had a certain amount of integrity with the work I did. But as you mentioned, just talk to everybody.
Yeah.
Volunteer for stuff. Go someplace where you can help and learn, and then maybe you can charge somebody to do it later on down the road. But I think you just kind of put it out there that you're into it, and you simply ask people for opportunities. Things do open up.
That's right. No, that's excellent. So my next question to that would be, how would you title yourself, or what position would you give yourself? Because I listen at you and I think complete entrepreneurial musician. He's an EntreMusician, hands down, but what would you say? A marketer, musician, record label owner?
I mean,
how would you?
It's kind of all the same. And I appreciate the question, but I mean, to my mind, if you're in a sales job, there's a mechanics to sales, but marketing is really sales. If there's a story and it's a thing. So going back again to the first job I got in Silicon Valley Creative Labs with that title, I see myself as an evangelist. So I partner with music or products or services or groups. If it connects with me and I believe it and I'm excited about it, then I just reach out to everybody I know and everybody I don't know and try and say, hey man, you got to check out this cool new toy. Oh, you do that? This will help you do it faster. This will help you do it better. You'll have more fun. And quite simply, I just get fueled by the enthusiasm, the adrenaline, and the coffee. And I'm just like super eager to say, oh man, yeah, I know you use that, but you should check this thing out. And it's just, it's so much fun to just be able to hit people to new stuff that's being done. Because especially in the music industry, there are well-deserved classics. A Les Paul through a Marshall is an absolute well-deserved classic.
Right.
But man, some of those Suhr guitars, I mean, there's some really new stuff that's happening out there with people who are respectfully looking at the past, but really innovating and doing something different. And what I'm loving about the music industry right now is it feels like more and more of the producers and engineers are starting to get back to trying to say, I want to have my own methods, my own sound, my own process. So I thought about 5 years ago, and I'm not sure if you saw the same thing, it seemed like every studio, it was the same mic, the same pre, the same compressor, the same monitors, and everybody wanted that. I mean, first of all, there were fewer options, so that's fair. But it was always the kind of thing, it's like, well, I don't know what my thing is, so I'll just buy the same gear that my hero has, and then I'll be legitimate.
Yeah.
I can't necessarily say that doesn't work, because classic gear is classic gear for a reason.
That's true.
There are more and more people now who are making gear it's not just clones of another vintage piece of gear from the 50s, but people who are really unique thinkers. And there are a lot of people out there saying, okay, well, and I guess this goes back to the guitars. Since the vintage gear has become so expensive because of the scarcity, now some of the boutique handcrafted gear that's also expensive because of the small running build runs, people are saying, okay, but before I go out and buy that used XYZ, let me at least audition this new piece. And a lot of these pieces now are being really built for new workflows. So it's great to see that, small companies can innovate again in a way that I didn't think they could 5 years ago.
Absolutely. I've always been the guy that says, where the tool is concerned, you have Keith Jarrett or Herbie Hancock or Dave Grusin sit down to that same piano and it's going to sound different, because their spirit comes through that. So I would say the same thing for Pro Tools or whatever microphone you're using or whatever guitar you pick up. Your spirit is going to transmit through that instrument, and it's going to sound different because of the hands that it's in at the time.
Oh, I mean, there's no question. I mean, that's the best. We're getting ready to go to the NAMM show again, and that's always one of the best things about the NAMM show is just watching 12 people play the same piano or pick up the same guitar. And it's funny. I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a fantastic guitar player. I think we were talking about Joe Walsh or some great player, and the thing the guy said that just I never thought of it really amazed me. He said, with a guitar player, if you're a normal right-hand guitar player, he's like, what you know is your left hand, who you are is your right hand.
Ooh,
and I'm like, oh, okay, wow. I get that.
That's beautiful.
I think there's so much about it because I think so many people. I mean, this again, we're going down all these nerdy rabbit holes, but so many people look at guitar players and focus on the fretting hand that they completely forget that all of the personality comes from the right hand.
That's beautiful, man. I never heard that before. That's absolutely on point.
Now, piano, I have no idea how piano works. That's a whole different thing. Those rules don't apply.
You got your left hand, but man, no, from a guitar perspective or from a musician perspective, I think that's, that's how we're created, man. And we're wired to be creative and intellectual at the same time. I mean, we're walking that tightrope all the time, the technical and the abstract,
There definitely, there is that. And it's interesting now with the people I'm working with, I'm working with some people and they're engineers. Okay, great. And that's what they do. And they definitely have an artistic ear, but, their goal is to implement efficiently, correctly, cleanly, and they do a beautiful job. Then there's another group of people I work with who are producer artists and also engineering themselves. And they face a completely different set of challenges,
of course,
in the studio. Then there are other people who are only the artist.
Yes. That's correct.
And it's fascinating to see how people in those groups can do things, because the engineers can go into an 8-hour session and they can engineer and they get 8 hours worth of engineering work done. An artist goes into a session and they can artist for 8 hours.
Correct.
But man, those people in the middle,
yeah,
it's like you can see it. Like, I have to take a walk around the block because I need to get into engineering mode for the next 20 minutes so I can then come back and not think about that and be the artist. And that is a crazy magic trick.
Well, you know, I think I kind of identify with that guy in the middle, but I think it's, for me, I would prefer, as a producer, having an engineer in the room. I think that is my best work, especially when I'm not the artist and when I'm working with an artist, and I can just say, hey, you know, make it green, make it blue, that needs to be warmer, and they know, oh, that's 5K, that's whatever, right? But as of late, you know, in the music that I've been working on the last 4 years or so, I haven't had to take the walk around the block because it's all been like one channel for me, from conception to what I'm putting down to what I'm overdubbing to how that needs to sound technically. And it's been kind of like this, I don't know, you used the word earlier, spandex, of just this rubber band expanding and contracting into this, what needs to happen at this moment. It's been kind of wild.
And then when you're, and are you working on music that you're producing, that's your own music, or are you working with other acts? Or
both. It's both, you know, because you know, I work with a lot of different producers, different songwriters who are not necessarily singers, and then the singers who write their own songs but then still need to sing the lyrics that were put in. So it's kind of like this, I don't want to say chameleon. I find it to be uniformity. It's just, I guess I'm schizophrenic and I'm put together like this, you know.
Well, but one process.
I'm sorry.
Like, you know, for your workflow, for my studio here, because I know now how I work, you know, I have enough I/O into the rig. It's not crazy. It's not a huge system, but I can have my vocal chain that never changes. I can swap out mics, but I plug into 4, my vocal's ready to go. My guitar's ready to go. So I've set it up so that for the most part, I can do acoustic guitar with a plug and a button. I can do vocals. So the basics I can very easily move without having to get something out and patch. If I decide to fire up, you know, the theremin or something crazy, I do that. But I found that really helps me, where if I just want to do a scratch vocal, I can just pull down my grot mic that's on a boom. I can get that. Is that kind of how you're working now?
Yeah, I am. And, you know, of course, I'm using Studio One. So, you know, there's a lot of templates that I've created and saved. And so, oh, this is the session. And so I'll just pull the template down, and that's the vocal change or chain, or this is how I'm mixing, or this is how I'm recording. I remember recording that guitar that way. And I'm a save monkey. I'll just save everything. Oh, this is Tyrone's session, or this is Roger's, or this is Lisa's. You know what I mean?
And the time stamp, and you've got 27 files from the same day.
Boom. Or, you know, and the fact of the matter is that I know when Lisa's coming into the studio, I'm used to her voice. We know the microphones that, you know, that worked. And it's just like, okay, we need to get that sound. So I'm not really, in my own time, I'm trying to discover new things, but not on her session. I'm trying to make the session happen. You know
I mean, I think that, and obviously I want to dig into that because I think there's further there, but to your workflow, I think that makes perfect sense now. And I think that's what's so nice about, you know, small to medium to large size studios now, is you can set that up so you have your basic templates. And I know you're not a slave to it, because you know, it's like, you're not like, no, that's my, but you don't necessarily have to get into your engineer pants to begin the creative process. You can say, well, tell you what, let's take it, let's get the performance, then we'll come back. And then I think what's so nice, we are just talking about, I would guess, just from getting to know you a little bit, that now that you know what the mic is, you know the go-to things, you've kind of got all that set. Because I know you don't want to be experimenting when she shows up. My guess, though, kind of every day, there's something where we say, okay, tell you what, for this background vocal, why don't you sing it into a coffee can? Yeah. You know, because if you got everything else so different, you can say, okay, let's now just play for a half an hour and see what happens.
Absolutely. And then there's a lot of stuff that, you know, because she's between Ohio and Indiana, for example. Okay. I know she's coming home for the holidays, so we'll go to the studio, but there's a lot of time. And in fact, I think I mentioned Lisa's getting a lot of airtime. I mentioned her to you because she sings with the Sweetwater All-Stars, which I know you've had some dealings with with Sweetwater. So with respect
Oh
to
yeah,
that,
and it's a great company to work with. Yeah, we definitely know that group as well.
absolutely. So, she has Studio One as well. And so she'll fly some lyrics. I mean, some vocals in and whatnot. And it's like, hey, this is what I've done. And so when she comes and we're actually physically together, she can say,
Yeah,
this is what I want to change. And I've already tweaked and whatnot, what she did.
we're
So,
doing the same thing. My buddy Scott Taylor, a songwriting partner, he's currently in Toronto, so we've been working on albums 3,000 miles away. So
yeah,
occasionally it'll be we'll do a little bit of a listen to session so that he can kind of listen to a mix in real time and we can kind of talk about stuff. But it's been interesting to collaborate remotely.
yeah,
I miss the days of just being able to get in a room and because I know how it is. If I'm doing a vocal, I get in my head around it. And when he was pushing record and play when I was doing the vocals, we're in the same room.
right.
He could throw spitballs at me and stuff just to kind of loosen me up. That's hard to do when you're working alone in a room. So I miss the camaraderie of just getting into the same space.
Yeah.
But it is really amazing that you actually can work with somebody that far away and get stuff done.
Oh, definitely. And I love it. There's a gentleman, his name is Nanat Savetachenin, and he is the associate director of the EntreMusician community. He's in Serbia, and we have members of the community in Finland and Italy and Germany. And it's becoming this hodgepodge of, because every week when we get together online, we're always playing music for each other. Well, this is what I'm working on. Hey, you need a saxophone on that? Let me, I could double the bass line or whatever. And it's just tracks flying all the time. You mentioned earlier, my friend, FTP Pro. I'm like, oh my God, you just took me back. Now the WeTransfer and the drop boxes and whatnot, but that was FTP Pro back in the day. And I thought, gee, man, it's amazing how things have happened, but
No,
it's just this traffic,
Yeah, it's just great. I mean, I spoke about my buddy Michael Hurwitz, phenomenal drummer, and he's got his rig set up. So once in a while we'll meet for coffee and I'll play him a couple of demos. He goes, "Oh, dude, I could play that one." So I'll send him a wave file, and 3 days later he sends me the drum file. And I'm like, what's interesting is, and I'm not sure. I mean, the stuff that we're doing, there's no commercial push for it.
Yeah.
So now Scott and I have been working together for so long. One of the things we've really been digging on lately is, like, for different tunes, having one person kind of guest in.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that, aside from Michael, because he just likes to do it, one of the things that I really like to do is find people and ask them to do something that's not normally what they do professionally. Right. Like we had a lady named Arissa, who was a good friend of mine, who is in Japan. She's part of the Tascam team. Phenomenal classical pianist. Mm-hmm. She'd never played rock and roll piano before. So we said, "Hey, you want to just lay some piano parts down on this?" We didn't give her much direction. We said, whatever you think makes sense. We got the piano part back. It was bizarre and wonderful. So we ended up completely rearranging our track to fit the piano.
Oh, wow.
Because the piano was doing something that we'd never do. And what we're finding out now is, by simply bringing other creative people in and letting them do what they do,
right, then
we can kind of like, okay, well, now this song has turned into a song that I would not have produced without this collaboration. And that's the stuff that I find to be fascinating. Because I know what I do.
Right. And you have your defaults. I mean, you try to get outside of yourself sometimes, but you always come back in and go, well, that's the way I hear it. But somebody else is going to hear it differently, and they're going to be able to add that,
And that's where the fun stuff is. I'm a guitar player. It's like, why would I ever play an E flat when I can play an E? I mean, I just don't know, who are you trying to impress by doing this when you can do that? I don't get it, right? But it is kind of strange to just hear, like, my buddy Daniel was putting some bass on one of the tracks, and he locked into a little line from the vocal that he aped on the bass that I never, to me, it was a little throwaway affectation. He's like, "Oh no, that's the hook of the song."
Wow.
So he brought it into part of the bass line. It's like, okay. And it's always interesting to hear what somebody else, kind of digs into.
That's absolutely right. Well, you know something, Eric, you and I could talk another 3 hours. I don't know what that does for, people's attention spans and whatnot. I'm
not sure if we talked about anything, but I could do this all day long.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, because you're, every time you say something, I'm like, oh, okay, that triggers another line of questioning that goes down. But what I want to find out from you, because I really value your opinion on this, and I think we can, make it public with respect to what you think AI is going to do as we approach 2025. And then coupled onto that, I want to know what your plans are as you've, involved yourself in this new group, and what's on the horizon for Eric in 25. Because this is not going to be the first time that we have this dialogue on this
Sure.
podcast channel.
I have been, I'm definitely slow to the party with AI. My buddy Scott is fully down with it. There are some interesting things. I personally, I'm excited about a piece of software I saw recently where if I record a tune, just a very quick rough demo with a guitar and a bass, it will suggest the other instrumentation that could go around it. So I like the idea of potentially collaborating with something like that to spark an idea that I then tweak.
Yeah.
I can also see the benefits of smart tools for plugins where I could say, hey, yes, I kind of know what this is, but it would be kind of interesting if I say, geez, I wish I could have this bass be a bit more present. It would be nice if I could interact with some of these tools on an artistic communication level, as opposed to knowing that I have to drop 500K.
Yeah.
And I know that that's me being a lazy engineer, but sometimes I would rather be able to, if I was working with an engineer, I'd say, hey, can we make that a little snappier? I would like to be able to just say that to the computer instead, if I'm the artist for the moment. So I do see that, and I think that there's interesting things where it could augment. I'm interested, especially to talk about songwriting. I'd be interested to hear some AI songs, and I've heard some that are kind of funny.
Oh man, I can hook you up with someone. Remind me after we're done here. I'm going to introduce you to a young lady in Memphis, Tennessee. Phenomenal work in AI. She's a lyricist, and it's just sending demos out and releasing stuff that is getting millions of streams, and she is right on point.
Yeah, because I don't think. I mean, it in the end, I think to a certain extent, it's just the tool. It's just like, okay, well, is it cheating when you first used a hammer instead of shoving the nail through with your hand? It's like, no, it's not. So is it? Do I ever think? I don't think that AI for the foreseeable future is going to ever come up with anything new. But I might just be very naive. I also, I'm horribly afraid of Skynet, so I don't want to be the one guy bad mouthing AI for when the robots eventually take over.
Right. But no, I've heard some interesting things. I'm very much, because we have these conversations all the time. And when I say all the time, Eric, I mean all the time, especially since Margot has joined our group, and she is the AI evangelist. Just in the way she doesn't have to say anything, just she presents a song, and it's like, oh, okay, well, all right. The thing about it is, though, I'm very much pro-human with regard to creativity and spirit. I am. But just like you, I see it as a hammer, a screwdriver, a pair of pliers, and especially where my deficit is as a recording engineer, I don't want to name the company. I use them all the time, but they're not paying me to promote them right now. But I use their products all the time because it helps to analyze what I think my ears are hearing, and my room is not perfect. So it really helps to level off an EQ curve that's going to give me the best bang for my buck as I'm releasing my material.
There's no doubt about it.
You have to use it.
And I like the idea. But if I kind of get my mix to the point, I go, dude, that's tight. And now I'm like, okay, let me save that. I'm curious. Absolutely. Have I run it through something where I can say, make my mix feel like Dear Prudence? And sometimes I listen to it and go, you completely blew it. And sometimes I go, ooh, wait a minute. That was cool. I'm going to go back to my project and steal that idea. I would never have done that to the snare drum. So, I like the idea of having those tools that do those things. I don't know if it's going to necessarily replace creativity, but if we can augment it, if I got a song where it's like all of a sudden, man, I wish I had a honky-tonk piano solo. It would be kind of nice to be able to say, okay, let's see if I can get a honky-tonk piano solo.
Exactly.
So we will see how that goes. And then as far as stuff, coming up, I've just made a change, working with a number of different groups right now. Again, all very hip boutique brands. So as I mentioned, the KSD monitors, I was doing an event at a previous gig, and somebody came in and said, hey, can we just, I know you're going to be demoing some gear and some vocals. Can we put these monitors up in the studio for the day? I'm like, sure, the more the merrier. Why not?
Yeah.
And I personally have never been like a monitor guy. It's like monitors to me either sound good or horrible. I've heard really good ones. Like, okay, they're nice. When they put these in, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm getting the stereo image. I'm getting the power from the low end that I want to get excited about, but I'm getting the upper mid clarity so I can do my work. And they're revealing, but they're not fatiguing. I'm like, this is actually interesting. This company now, they've opened a distributor in the US, and they said, hey, would you like to help us effectively evangelize these? So I'll be working with KSD speakers, also working with a company out of Portugal, Art Novian, that does fantastic acoustic treatments. So they have anything from small like pop-up kits with the wall panels and the gobo, to the ability to take an app on your phone, do a full scan of your studio. You send that data to them. They come back and they say, here are the issues with your space. We suggest these products in these placements, and they give you a full build-out plan.
Amazing.
So I mean, that's a use of AI right there. It's phenomenal. And then we're also doing some work with Paul Wolf and Wolf Audio with some very cool products that are coming out for production. We're doing some work with Equitech for all of their power products to make sure that your studio is actually optimized for the gear you're using. And like I said, the stuff with Hendy Amps and Moore Applebaum. And it's all of these hip, mad scientists who are just making cool stuff. And it's like, we're putting these things together now where if you have one of these and one of these and one of these and one of these, you can make the record.
Yeah.
And as much as I do love the gear, the real beauty is I get to spend all day long talking to my friends who make great records about gear that would help them make it faster or better or both.
Yes.
I mean, it's a dream come true. So, for all the kids out there, like I said, man, there's a billion jobs. Just find a direction, keep going. Some days are going to suck. Some days aren't going to suck. And then you end up with days like this where you start your morning talking to Jerry. So, I mean, there's no complaints here. It's been a weird road, and it's been a good one.
Man, I'm glad that you spent your morning with me. Seriously, and I'm glad to know you, and I'm grateful for what the horizon will be as long as we continue to have these great conversations, because you've been generous, and I've said that, and I'll say it here. You were saying that you were an evangelist for the resources, for the tools, for the technology, but you're also an evangelist for helping to bring people together. And with Matt T.O., you've already done that with me. We've had our conversation. And I see you as that person that you just say, hey, not only is this piece of gear worthy of your time, but hey, let me introduce you to someone who I think can help.
That's what it all is.
You've been brilliant.
As I say, if there's one thing from, the story, it's like, I got a lot of jobs and I like interviews and all that kind of stuff, but there were a lot of people who took a chance on me, and I would say when I helped out, but trained, there were a lot of people that said, okay, I see that there's potential here. You don't know these things. We can address that. And I was given a chance by a lot of people. And these people I've worked with again 30 years later. Yeah. And I mean, how it is. You go through life and you meet a billion people, and two of those people become part of your tribe, and you connect with those. And then you make the introductions, you meet a bunch of people. Everybody's cool. But these are the ones that become part of the group, so you just keep going and going and going. And, part of it is like, it's fun to burn a bridge when you quit sometimes. And I've done it. But for the most part, it's almost like if you kind of just like leave the house and try not to be an ass, right, you can kind of get through life. I mean, it's like everybody screws up, but it's just kind of nice. And I've been able to surround myself with people like you who try and actually make things better by the end of the day than they were when you got up in the morning. And I really appreciate the work you're doing out there.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And I appreciate what is about to happen because, again, this won't be our last time here. You've already been on our sister show, Artist Impact. And, we're just going to, yeah. So 25 is going to be exciting. I actually turned 60 in 25. So, I'm looking forward to really just, getting in the left lane, and I'm not quite ready to put the bucket list together, but I got a lot of things I need to, get ahead and accomplish.
Those opportunities do come up, kind of like And I'm not sure if it's manifesting, or like if you just tell enough people, like, oh man, I would love to go down and do a session that, you know, will move with capital. Who knows? But sometimes if the word kind of gets out, somebody says, hey, you know what? I'm going to be doing this thing. Why don't you come along?
Absolutely. Absolutely right. That's what we're going to do, man. I'm a very intentional guy. And I'm grateful that you're just as intentional, which is why we're sitting here now. So we're going to do it again, man. Thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate it. And what's going to happen for those of you who are watching and listening is we're going to hang up here, but Eric is going to stick around because our EntreMusician community really appreciates the backstage pass. And so he's going to come in and give him some things that you would hear if you were a part of the community. So we're going to say goodbye for now. We're going to invite you to become a member of the EntreMusician community. And we're going to talk about some real deep things that are top secret that we can't reveal here. So thank you, Eric, man. I appreciate you, brother.
A pleasure. I hope you have a great holiday. Thank you, man.
Absolutely. That's going to do it for this episode of the EntreMusician.com. Get in touch with Eric. He's everywhere. He's on IG. He's on Facebook. He's on LinkedIn. Just look him up, West Sacramento, California. And you see how wonderful he is. And he loves the sound of his own voice, according to his own confession. So you'll get into a good conversation with him, I'm sure, online or off. My name is Jerry B. Come and join the EntreMusician community. It's very easy to do. All you have to do is just click that link right there, okay? And that puts you in touch with me, and we can walk you in to the on-ramp of what so many wonderful musicians have done. The community is growing, and it is thriving. I want you to like, subscribe, and share this channel and this video to everybody you know, and 14 people you don't, that you get down with the EntreMusician. All right? Peace and blessings to you. Happy New Year. We'll see you next time. God bless.